I noticed it in a small moment that shouldn't have mattered. She came home late, dropped her bag by the door, and walked straight into the kitchen. I asked how her day was. She said, "Fine," in the way people say it when they don't want to talk. Then she paused, looked at her phone, and smiled. Not at me, at something on the screen. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter than that. A small, internal shift. The kind you try to ignore because it doesn't have a reason you can point to. I didn't say anything. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I was wrong. We didn't start in silence. We didn't start distant. We didn't start complicated. We started in the kind of way people describe as easy, but never really explain. Her name was Nora. We met at a friend's apartment during a casual get-together. Not a party. No loud music. No dancing. Just people sitting around on mismatched furniture, holding drinks they forgot to finish. I didn't notice her right away. She was sitting on the floor, leaning against the couch, listening to someone talk about a job they hated. Not checking her phone. Not interrupting. Just listening. That caught my attention more than anything else. Later, when most of the group had drifted into smaller conversations, I ended up sitting near her. I asked if she knew the host well. She shrugged. Not really. I met her through work. You? College, I said. She nodded. Then there was a pause that didn't feel awkward. That's how it started. Not with flirting. Not with charm. With quiet. We talked about small things. Where we grew up. How neither of us felt particularly attached to the city, but neither of us knew where else we'd go. How strange it was to be in our late 20s and still feel like we were pretending to know what we were doing. She didn't try to impress me. She didn't overshare. She didn't turn herself into a performance. She spoke slowly, like she was choosing her words on purpose. When the night ended, she asked if I wanted her number. Not in a bold way. Not in a shy way. Just direct. I said yes. We didn't text constantly after that. A message here. A reply hours later. No pressure. No expectations. But every time my phone lit up with her name, I felt something settle in me. Not excitement. Not nerves. Calm. Our first date was a walk. No destination. Just coffee and paper cups and wandering through streets we both claimed we'd explored but couldn't really describe. We talked about our families, not in a heavy way, just pieces. Her parents had divorced when she was young. My dad had left when I was a teenager. We didn't bond over it. We didn't make it a moment. We just acknowledged it, like two people setting small truths on the table without needing to decorate them. When we said goodbye, she hugged me. Not long. Not lingering. Just enough. I remember thinking, I could do this. Not fall in love overnight. Not plan a future. Just keep walking beside her and see what happened. So I did. We built something slowly. Dinner after work. Weekends that blurred into each other. Long conversations in bed about nothing and everything. Nora had a habit of telling me things as soon as they happened. Small things. A weird comment from a coworker. A frustrating email. Something funny she overheard. She didn't save stories for later. She didn't cure it. She just shared. It made me feel included in her inner world. Like I was standing close enough to catch things as they fell. I started doing the same. If my boss annoyed me, I told her. If a friend said something that stuck with me, I told her. If I felt insecure about something and didn't know why, I told her. Not because she fixed it. Not because she always had the right response. But because saying it out loud to her made it feel lighter. We became each other's first stop. Bad day. Nora. Good news. Nora. Random thought at midnight. Nora. It wasn't dependency. It didn't feel like pressure. It felt like a shared reflex. Like we were used to turning toward each other the way you turn toward warmth. We moved in together after almost 2 years. Not because we sat down and decided it was time. It just happened. We were already spending most nights together, already splitting groceries, already leaving clothes at each other's places. Keeping 2 apartments started to feel unnecessary. So we found one. Small. Old building. Thin walls. But bright in the mornings. The kind of place where normal life could happen. The first months were full of small domestic discoveries. She drank coffee too fast and complained about stomach aches. I left my shoes in the middle of the floor without noticing. She liked doing dishes immediately. I liked letting them sit. We negotiated. We adjusted. We laughed. At night, we lay in bed and talked. Not deep, intense conversations every time. Mostly small ones. What annoyed us? What made us laugh? What we were worried about. We talked until one of us fell asleep. Sometimes mid-sentence. There was a sense that no matter what happened during the day, we would end it together. That mattered to me more than I realized. Looking back, I think that was when I felt most secure. Not because everything was perfect. Not because we never had tension. Because I knew I was the person she came to first. And she was mine. I didn't notice when that started changing. That's the part that still bothers me. I wish I could point to a moment, a specific week, a clear reason. But it didn't happen like that. It happened the way habits fade. Quietly, gradually, almost politely. At first, Nora just seemed busier. Work picked up. New responsibilities. Longer days. That made sense. Of course she was tired. Of course she didn't always feel like talking. I told myself not to take it personally. Sometimes she would come home, drop her bag, and go straight to the shower. Before, she usually sat next to me first. Told me something small, like a warm-up to being home. Now she didn't. She'd come out, sit on the couch, and scroll on her phone. If I asked how her day was, she'd say, fine, or long. I'd ask a follow-up. What happened? She'd shrug. Just work stuff. At first, I pushed a little, not aggressively, just gently. Like what? She'd give me the short version. A few sentences. Then the conversation would thin out and disappear. I told myself she was decompressing. Everyone decompresses differently. But something about it felt different. She wasn't unloading. She wasn't venting. She wasn't reaching. She was just done. Processed. Finished. I started noticing I was hearing about things later. Not from her in the moment, but in passing. Oh yeah, I talked to Jenna about that yesterday. Or, Mark thought that was funny when I told him. Small sentences. But they landed heavy. Because I used to be the person she told first. I didn't confront her. Not because I was afraid of her. Because I didn't know how to say, I miss being your first thought, without sounding childish. Without sounding needy. Without sounding like I was asking to be the center of her world. I didn't want to be her only outlet. I just wanted to matter in the way I used to. So I stayed quiet. And quiet became my default. I started editing myself. If something happened at work, I'd ask myself, do I really need to talk about this? If I felt stressed, I'd think, she's already tired. If I felt hurt by something small, I'd tell myself, it's not worth bringing up. I began carrying things instead of handing them to her. Not because she asked me to. Because I didn't feel invited anymore. She started spending more time with friends after work. Not hiding it. Not lying. Just living. She'd text me. Grabbing a drink with Jenna. Going to dinner with Mark and Sarah. Before, those texts usually came with something else. Wanna come? Or, should we hang out later? Now they didn't. She'd come home later, already relaxed, already in a good mood. I'd ask how it was. She'd smile. Good. Sometimes she'd tell me a story. Sometimes she wouldn't. Either way, I felt like I was getting the highlight reel, not the real-time feed. We still said, I love you. But it started sounding like punctuation. Something you say because that's what you say. Not because you're actively feeling it in the moment you're saying it. We still slept in the same bed. But more nights were spent facing opposite directions. Not in anger. Not in tension. Just separate. I'd lie there and think about telling her I felt distant. Then I'd imagine her saying, I'm just tired, which might have been true. And I didn't want to argue with tired. So I kept swallowing it. The first time I clearly realized what was happening didn't involve a confession or a fight. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I came home early. I'd finished a project at work and decided to cook. Not a big gesture. Not a romantic plan. Just something warm. Something shared. I texted her, home early. Making dinner. She didn't reply. I assumed she was busy. I cooked anyway. I set the table. 2 plates. 2 forks. I lit a candle and immediately felt ridiculous, like I was trying too hard. I almost blew it out. I left it. She came home about an hour later than usual. She walked in, dropped her bag, and said, Hey. Hey, I said. Dinner's almost ready. She nodded and went to wash her hands. When she came back, she looked at the table. Oh, she said. You cooked. Yeah, I said. Thought we could eat together. There was a small pause. Not long. Not dramatic. I already ate, she said. I grabbed something with Jenna after work. Forgot to tell you. She said it like information. Not like an apology. Not like something that mattered. Oh, I said. She sat down anyway. Pulled out her phone. I served myself. We sat there in silence. She scrolled. I ate. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't ask why I was home early. She didn't notice the candle. She wasn't being cruel. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She just hadn't thought of me. That was the moment. Not because she ate without me. Not because plans changed. But because it hadn't occurred to her to tell me. Hadn't occurred to her that I might be part of the decision. I realized I wasn't the person she checked in with anymore. I wasn't the first place she went. I was the place she returned to. There's a difference. I didn't say anything. If I said, "You forgot about me," it would sound small. If I said, "I feel invisible," it would sound dramatic. So I kept my mouth shut and let the moment settle inside me like a stone. After that, I noticed everything. Not in a paranoid way. In a tired way. I noticed how often her stories started with, "So I told Jenna," instead of, "I wanted to tell you." I noticed how she processed her stress elsewhere. How she laughed more freely on the phone than she did with me. How she came home already emptied out, leaving me with the calm aftermath. And I noticed what happened inside me. I stopped reaching. Not because I didn't care. Because I didn't want to feel like I was intruding. We became efficient. Bills paid. Chores done. Schedules coordinated. From the outside, we looked stable. From the inside, I felt lonely. Not alone. Lonely. There's a difference. I thought about leaving. Not in a dramatic, planned way. More like a passing thought that scared me because it didn't scare me. What would it be like to live alone? The idea didn't feel unbearable. The fact that it didn't feel unbearable made something in me go cold. I stayed anyway. Not because I thought things would magically fix themselves. Because leaving felt like admitting something had died. And I wasn't ready to name it. We eventually had a conversation. Not a big one. Not a dramatic one. It happened while we were doing dishes, hands moving through the routine like that was safer than eye contact. I said quietly, "Do you ever feel like we don't really talk anymore?" She paused, water running, then said, "We talk. Not like we used to," I said. She shrugged. "People change." That was it. Not cruel. Not defensive. Just flat. I wanted to say, "I miss being your person. I miss being where you land. I miss being included in real time." But the words stayed in my throat because I didn't know what I would do with her answer. So we kept living. Side by side. Months passed. The distance didn't explode. It settled. We still went to family events together. Still posted photos. Still looked fine. But I felt like I was living with someone who used to love me. One night, she fell asleep on the couch. I watched her for a long time. Not with anger. Not with longing. With familiarity that felt hollow, like looking at an old photograph and realizing you don't remember what it felt like to be in it. I realized something uncomfortable. If we broke up tomorrow, our daily routines wouldn't change much. That's when I knew we had crossed a line. Eventually, she said she wanted space. Not in a tearful way. Not with a speech. Just casually. As if it had been forming in her mind for a while. I've been thinking about staying with Jenna for a bit. My first feeling wasn't panic. It was relief. I hated myself for it, but it was honest. "Okay," I said. She looked at me like she expected me to argue. I didn't. She packed a small bag. She hugged me. It felt familiar. And empty. When she left, the apartment felt quieter, but it also felt lighter, like I wasn't being asked to pretend there was still something to tend to. After a week, she texted, "I think I need more time." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Yeah," I typed. "That makes sense." That was it. No big breakup conversation. No final fight. Just a slow acknowledgement. We coordinated logistics through messages. Who would take what? Who would keep the apartment? Practical things. She came by once to get the rest of her things. We were polite. She said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Me too." We didn't specify what for. Then she left. I didn't cry right away. I sat on the couch and felt tired. Not devastated. Not angry. Just tired. I thought about all the times I had swallowed words. All the times I had told myself it wasn't a big deal. All the ways I had made myself smaller because I didn't want to be inconvenient to the person I loved. The next day didn't feel like a new chapter. No clarity. No sudden strength. Just the same apartment. The same kitchen. The same routines, now happening alone. I went to work. I answered emails. I nodded at coworkers. On the outside, nothing about me looked altered. Inside, I felt like I was carrying something fragile I didn't have language for. Not grief. Not relief. Not freedom. More like an awareness that something important had changed shape and I didn't know what to call it yet. For a while, I kept expecting a delayed emotional wave. I thought one night I'd break down. That I'd suddenly miss her in a sharp, overwhelming way. That I'd regret not fighting harder. But what came instead was quieter. I noticed how much energy I had been using just to maintain a version of myself that fit into her shrinking availability. I noticed how often I had chosen silence over honesty. not because I was lying, but because I didn't want to feel like an interruption. That realization sat heavy. I started replaying small moments. Not to torture myself. Not obsessively. Just in passing. Times when I almost said something and didn't. Times when she almost reached and then turned back to her phone. Times when we were inches away from having a real conversation and chose comfort instead. None of those moments looked important at the time. That's what scared me. How easy it is to ignore the small things. How small things become everything. I kept thinking about how we used to talk. Not in a poetic way. Not in a cinematic way. Just naturally. She would come home and start talking before she even took her shoes off. I would tell her about my day without wondering if it was worth mentioning. We didn't schedule intimacy. We didn't plan vulnerability. It just happened. Somewhere along the line, we started treating connection like an optional extra. Something we'd get to later. Later never came. I don't think Nora is a bad person. I don't think she's cold. I don't think she intentionally shut me out. I think she grew. I think I grew. And we didn't grow toward each other. We grew adjacent. Side by side. Close enough to share a bed. Not close enough to share an inner life. That's a strange kind of loss, because from the outside it doesn't look like loss. It looks stable. It looks calm. It looks fine. But fine isn't the same as alive. There were nights after she left when I sat on the couch and noticed how quiet my mind felt. Not peaceful. Just not bracing. I hadn't realized how often I was preparing myself for disappointment. Preparing myself for half-listening. Preparing myself for disinterest. Preparing myself to be small. Without that preparation, there was space. Empty space. But honest space. Sometimes I filled it with distractions, shows, music, scrolling until my eyes hurt. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I just sat. And sitting with yourself after years of quietly disconnecting is uncomfortable. You start noticing things. How quickly you reach for noise. How rarely you ask yourself what you actually feel. I started paying attention to the moments when I wanted to reach for my phone. Not to text her. Not anymore. But to tell someone something. A funny thought. An annoying interaction. A small victory. I'd open a message thread. Then pause. And ask myself, who do I want to tell? Sometimes there was no clear answer. That scared me more than missing her. Because it meant I had lost touch with the instinct to share, not with a person, but with the act itself. I didn't want to replace Nora. I didn't want to jump into something new. I wasn't looking for another relationship. I was trying to remember what it felt like to exist without negotiating my presence. To speak without checking if it was too much. To feel without minimizing. I don't think staying with her broke me. But I do think it taught me how quietly you can disappear if you're not paying attention. Not because someone erases you. Because you slowly erase yourself to fit into a smaller space. I don't carry anger toward her. If anything, I carry a strange clarity about what I don't want. I don't want to be the person someone updates. I don't want to be the person who finds out things later. I don't want to be the place someone comes home to after they've already emptied themselves elsewhere. I want to feel considered. Chosen. Included. First, sometimes. That's it. That's the bar. There are still moments when something happens and my first instinct is to tell her. Not because I want her back. Not because I miss her specifically. Because she was my habit. Habits don't disappear just because circumstances change. They fade slowly. Like everything else did. When that happens, I let the thought pass. I don't judge it. I don't romanticize it. I just notice it. Noticing has become the theme of my life now. Noticing when I feel open. Noticing when I feel closed. Noticing when I start shrinking. Noticing when I start making myself easier instead of being myself. I don't always know what to do with what I notice. But noticing feels like a start. If I ever end up with someone again, I don't think I'll be looking for fireworks. I don't think I'll be looking for perfection. I think I'll be paying attention to something much quieter. Do we tell each other things in real time? Do we reach instinctively? Do we make space for each other's inner worlds? Do we notice when the other goes quiet? Those are the questions that matter to me now. Not compatibility on paper. Not shared hobbies. Not surface-level chemistry. Those things change. Habits remain. Or they don't. And that's everything. I think about the versions of myself that existed inside that relationship. The early one, open, unfiltered. The middle one, hopeful, confused. The later one, quiet, careful, small. I don't judge any of them. They were all trying to survive in the only ways they knew how. I don't know what version comes next. But I know I don't want to become someone who waits to be chosen. I don't want to accept being an afterthought. I don't want to confuse presence with connection. The truth is, she stopped coming to me the way she used to. and I responded by going quiet in my own way. We mirrored each other's distance and called it normal. There's something sad about how gentle the ending was. No slammed doors, no screaming matches, no dramatic speeches, just two people slowly stepping back, creating space, calling it breathing room, until the space became the relationship. Sometimes I think about how many couples are living that exact story right now, sitting on opposite ends of the same couch, scrolling, half listening, assuming this is just what long-term love looks like. Maybe for some people it is, but I know what it felt like for me. It felt like being in a room where the air is slowly thinning. You don't notice at first. You adapt. You breathe shallower. You tell yourself you're fine. Until one day you realize you've been holding your breath for a very long time. I don't want to live like that again. I don't need constant intensity. I don't need daily grand gestures. I just need to feel like there's someone on the other end of my sentences. Someone who wants to know. Someone who still comes toward me. This isn't a redemption story. I'm not dramatically transformed. I don't have a neat conclusion. I just have a clearer understanding of what it feels like when you stop being someone's first thought, and what it costs you to accept that without speaking. There's a part of me that keeps expecting some final emotional wave. Like I'll wake up one morning and everything will suddenly make sense. Like I'll feel finished. But healing hasn't felt like that. It's felt more like learning how to live with a new shape of myself. Not better, not worse, just different. I notice it in small ways. When my phone vibrates and I don't assume it's her. When I walk past places we used to go and don't automatically slow down. When I cook for one and don't feel the urge to make extra. Those changes didn't happen overnight. They crept in quietly, the same way the distance did. Sometimes I think about how, near the end, I started censoring my own happiness too. If something good happened, I wouldn't always tell her. Not because I wanted to hide it. Because I didn't want to watch her half listen. I didn't want to feel like I was interrupting her life with mine. That realization still stings. Not because she meant to make me feel that way. Because I allowed myself to accept it. I stayed because leaving felt like failure. Like giving up. Like admitting I couldn't make something work. But staying wasn't working either. It was just continuing. There's a difference between commitment and inertia. I didn't know that then. I know it now. I don't know what Nora would say if she heard this story. If she'd recognize it. If she'd feel accused. If she'd feel sad. If she'd feel nothing. I don't need her validation anymore. For a long time, I measured my worth by how reachable I was to her. By how needed I felt. By how often she chose me. Now I'm learning, slowly, unevenly, how to choose myself. Not in a loud, self-help way. In small ways. By noticing when something hurts and not dismissing it. By letting myself want what I want without justifying it. By refusing to turn my needs into flaws. I still miss the version of her from the beginning sometimes. The one who looked at me when I spoke. The one who asked questions. The one who felt like home. But missing that version doesn't mean I want to go back. Because going back wouldn't bring her back. It would just put me back into the same quiet shrinking. I don't want to shrink anymore. I don't want to become fluent in silence again. If I ever end up with someone again, I want us to keep reaching. Not perfectly. Not constantly. Just enough that neither of us becomes the last person to know what's happening in the other's life. Because love doesn't always end with a fight. Sometimes it ends when people stop reaching. Sometimes it ends when you become the recap. And you accept it until it starts to feel like who you are. That's the truth I carry now. Not loudly. Not with anger. Just with a steady, sometimes uncomfortable awareness. And that's how it ended. Not with betrayal. Not with a scene. Just two people quietly stepping out of each other's inner lives. And continuing on. Separately.